Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Actual Magician, yes I am an Actual Magician, Explains, where today we're going to be covering the importance of keeping a magical diary or magical journal. And I'm going to be giving you 10 top tips for writing a journal, for the importance of keeping a journal, for different ideas that you can use to really make the most of your journal, no matter how you keep it over time. And we're going to be looking at 10 tips to actually record information in the journal, what sorts of things to record, whether you should record everything down to the detail, what's important to record and what's perhaps not important to record. I've been keeping a magical diary since I was in my early teens. This, for example, is a folder from 1983, I believe, 1983. And we can see in here that what we've got here is my membership of an organisation called the Order of the Golden Wheel, which was way before the internet, about the only way that we could actually get in touch with other occultists. And I joined this when I was 18 in 1983. And obviously I've kept all of the records of my time in the Golden Wheel. One of the things that we did was we listed the subjects that we were interested in. For example, I've listed witchcraft, secret rituals, occult, secrets, initiation, magic and mysticism. And then there were, in effect, a list of contacts. I've put this upside down just for, I guess it is anonymous, so we can put it the full right way up there. And everyone had a box number, and you could contact the box numbers by sending a plain envelope with your letter inside with the box number on, and then the people running the organisation put the address on and passed that on and so forth. And then we swapped addresses when we were comfortable that we'd met someone that we were actually interested in talking to. And this basically is the entire folder of correspondence and letters. Not the entire correspondence or letters, but some of them certainly. So it's really important to keep all of these artifacts, because you'll never know until the future when you look back at them as to why it was important to keep them. And that's what we're going to take a look at in these top 10 tips. So tip number 1 is record as much as you want, as often as you want. The most important thing with keeping a magical journal is this: it sets up a state of self-observation. It habituates, through practice and discipline, self-observation. In effect, you're recording your inner thoughts and your inner experience in an external form, and then you're viewing that, and that is automatically then sending a signal back to your mind that you are observing and recording externally what you're doing internally as your whole internal experience, even the things that you've done, situations that you've been in during the day. These are all a mental experience, and as a result it sets up a loop which is very important in the theoricus stage of the initiatory work. So the Zelator should keep a magical diary consistently for at least a year as part of their membership, for example, of our Crucible Club, where we give exercises for each month, observations, reflections, visionary work, ritual and so forth. And then we expect the student to keep a journal of that, because not so much for our assessment or anything, but more to instill in the student that sense of self-reflection all the way from the very first point that they join the initiatory system. The second most important point is to record in a format that you feel happy with, whether it's a folder, whether it's a series of jotted notes, whether it's an entire diagram perspective of what you're experiencing or thinking about, ideas that you're having. It doesn't really matter. Just choose the format that is suitable for you. If you want to do it in some sort of graphical or artistic or creative format, that is also perfectly reasonable as well. Because the important thing is that it is grounding you in reality, that you're including in it and formatting it in a way that also reflects your current state and your awareness at that time. It becomes part of the anchored nostalgia of the item or artifact itself, of the magical journal. The third most important thing is to regularly review your diary at intervals, particularly in fallow periods in your magical work. This allows for observation of the distance that we naturally have between what we believe or think we believe at a particular time, our actual behaviour, and how that flags up the gap in our self-knowledge. If part of the great work is to know oneself, then a magical diary is a good way of laying bare the gap between your belief, your behaviour, your recorded beliefs, and later self-examination. The fourth tip is, like any activity, be gentle with yourself, encouraging and positive, and pick up the journal if you drop it for any length of time. It's perfectly reasonable to have times when you don't keep a magical journal, but quite often those are the most important times in your life that are worthy of recording in some way or another. So even if you just make notes and then write it up later or keep it as notes, that's also perfectly fine. You'll see from a number of my own journals over the years that they have ranged between handwritten notes in formal diaries, to notebooks, to folders, to ring binders, to more laid out, formulated journals, and so forth. The fifth most important tip is to record everything. I say record as much as you want, but also don't self-censor. You never know in the future what's going to be important in the present, because we are in the present moment experiencing it, and it's only later, as Umberto Eco said, misquoting or re-quoting a biblical quote, the truth is brief, the rest is merely commentary. The magical diary is our magical truth. It's what Crowley said, and why he said it was one of the most important things, that with the bell and the wand and the book, these are three of the lesser referred to, particularly the bell, I guess, not so much the wand, but the bell and the magical book are really important and often overlooked when we talk about the four magical weapons of the pentacle, the wand, the sword or dagger, and the chalice. Quite often we miss the importance of the book. And it's one of the things that over the last 45 years I've come to realise is probably the singular most important thing. It's certainly the most consistent, important magical artefact or tool that I've used over that length of time. Aleister Crowley believed that the book was of equal measure in terms of magical tools and artefacts to other items such as the magical sword or the wand or the robe or the magical circle or altar. In chapter 13 of book 4, Magic, he relates the book and says, "The book of spells or of conjuration is the record of every thought, word and deed of the magician. For everything that he has willed is willed to a purpose. It is the same as if he had taken an oath to perform some achievement. Therefore, the writing of the book itself is the magical task, is the magical exercise." Now, Crowley does go on to say, now this book must be a holy book, not a scribbling book in which you jot down every piece of rubbish that comes into your head. It is written in Liber 7, verse 23, "Every breath, every word, every thought, every deed is an act of love with thee. Be this devotion a potent spell to excise the demons of the five." However, Crowley's own notebooks weren't necessarily as he described them ideally in magic. where he says, "The pages of this book are of virgin vellum, made from the calf which was born by Isis Hathor, the Great Mother, to Osiris Apis, the Redeemer. It is bound in blue leather, on which the word Thelema is written in gold. Let the pen with which the writing is done be the feather of a young male swan, that swan whose name is Om, and let the ink be made with the gall of a fish, the fish Oanes." Thus far concerning the book. However, Crowley's own notebooks were quite often written on the fly, often while travelling, and despite that, though, we do have a lot of journaling from Crowley, and this is in part why he is one of the most documented occultists of the last century or two. One of the things about recording all events is it also blurs the line between the magical, the mystical and the mundane. These are entirely illusionary divisions that we make in our world, and there's no such thing as a non-magical trip to the shops. Everything is part of our experience, the world, the universe. This is our laboratory, this is our workshop. This is why the worker is hidden in the workshop. One of the things with life is it is an entirely magical and mystical experience, and it's just our response to that that might have some level of mundanity or separation to it. And this is why it's important to record everything and not necessarily self-censor anything out. The sixth tip is to use time-bound activities, for example, weekly challenges, daily challenges that you do something on the hour every hour for one day. You do an exercise, and this is one of my most favourite tasks to do, over a year, and you do it daily. I've got lots of journals where I decided for a year to do a particular thing on a daily basis, and it's the management of that and the discipline required for that that's very useful. But also it means you can adjust your activity to the time that you have available in your life at that particular time. The seventh tip is something my second occult teacher did to me or gave to me, and that was when I was having an argument with him about the importance of the magical journal. He said, "Right, I want you to open your magical journal now." So I went and got my magical journal, my diary at the time. I opened it up, and he said, "I want you to write this on this page for the day." And I think it was maybe the late 80s. And I wrote to his instruction, "On this page," this is exactly what I wrote in all caps, "on this page, I will note below the date and time which I am seeing this sentence and this page, and I will make any further remarks about it." And that was it. And every now and again, maybe once every few years, I guess, I've come across that page, and I then had to go and write in it, it's November the 5th, 4 p.m., it's 2018, and I am seeing this again, and so on. And I have to make my comments and record my changing perspective on why I think he asked me to do that, why I'm still doing it, what's happened since the last time I did it. And that's gone on. I've had to add lots of extra pages into that journal, loose pages, to consistently record. I think I probably come across it 8 or 9 times in the 30 or so, 35 years since he made me do that, and I still keep coming back to it. So it's perhaps something you might want to try for yourself. I pass this curse on to you, and it's a very useful exercise, and I'm not sure that I will ever understand exactly the purpose of it, but I do I try and make a good job of understanding it each time I return to it. Okay, number 8 on the tips is include everything in the sense of artifacts, tickets, photographs and so forth, particularly if you're doing an online version. Obviously, when I was first recording diaries and so forth, there was no such thing as online. And if you're doing an electronic journal or some other form of journal, maybe even keeping it on your phone, then do include. There's systems like Evernote and things like this where you can actually build together a journal, bullet point journals as well. Even if you do a junk journal or a scrap journal creatively, as almost an art or design project, you can also add things like tickets, photographs, letters, all sorts of things that you might want to actually include within your diary to represent the time, the emotions, and so forth. Another aspect of keeping a magical record, a magical journal, or magical diary is keeping correspondence. Obviously, when I first started, I was keeping correspondence of letters between myself and other occultists, and also people who were fellow students at the time. I was also corresponding with authors of books and other occultists, witches in particular, who I was contacting through articles that they were writing in the magazines of the time. Nowadays, of course, this would all be done by email, and it's useful to have a folder of important emails with important information in them as part of your magical journaling. Quite often this is important because when you go back and look at things, you realise that perhaps you didn't have a full understanding of what the other person was communicating to you, and this is an important lesson all in itself. So that brings us on to number 9, which is it doesn't matter the media, it only matters the recording. So it doesn't matter if you have an electronic journal, if you have a notepad, if you have a pre-templated out bullet journal, however you want to do it, it doesn't matter the medium. In fact, that is in a sense its own record of the time that you're making your journal entries. So that's also very important. Feel free to experiment. Sometimes I've tried to do just haiku. Sometimes I've done laid out things where I've had headings for mental health or mental state, emotional state, physical state, spiritual state, and I recorded against those every day for months and months and months. Sometimes I did a journal where I would rotate the journal and write things along the side, write things in columns like newspaper headlines and so forth, and just experimented with different ways of keeping the journal. And at number 10 is to read other people's journals. You can read Aleister Crowley's journals and diaries. He kept a lot of journals and diaries and refers to those in his own confessions. And also we have a lot of his students who have journals, for example, the Jane Wolfe journals from Cefalù in Italy. Those are very intense and show just how hard the lifestyle was that Crowley was promoting. We also have records of Dion Fortune students, their magical path workings and so forth. All of these are very useful, and even read outside of magical practice itself, other people's journals and diaries for inspiration to your own. Now here's a couple of bonus things that I would suggest if you want to start your diary right now or want to add to your current magical diary. The first is a column entry that you make at the start of your diary, and I call this Liber Lumen and Liber Nocte, the book of day and the book of night. You can call it positive and negative, you can call it light and dark, or whatever you want, these two columns. But in one column, you habitually write good things, positive things, things that you feel good about yourself or what you've done or what you've achieved or what you've learned. And on the other side, you do negative things, for example, where you feel disappointed or where you feel somewhat negative or depressed or angry, or anything that you feel is negative, you put on the other side. But then it's important when you go back to review those things that you actually then take lessons from both sides of that book. The second bonus tip that I'd give you is for starting a diary, or perhaps marking a significant time in an existing diary, is to write down what I call the Book of the Unbound. And that is a list that you can make, for example, where you write at the top, if I could not fail at anything, I would, and then you list all of the things that you would do if you couldn't fail at anything, if you could not fail at anything at all. And it's important from an NLP perspective that you word it that way. It's not if I was always successful. It is if I could not fail at anything, I would do the following things. There is, I guess, a third tip. This is actually from the Crucible Club that we teach, and it's the first part of keeping a magical journal, is the list of beliefs. So basically a book of belief. I believe, and then you just list your beliefs, and you review and return to that very regularly through the work of the Order of Everlasting Day, for example, that we have at the end of the Crucible Club, for those wanting to apply themselves to the Western Esoteric Initiatory System. So those are three things. So there's the Liber Nocte, Liber Lumen columns. There's the If I Could Not Fail at Anything exercise, the Book of the Unbound, because it's unbinding your restriction. And then third and finally, the Book of Belief, that you list your beliefs and you come back to assess, challenge, reflect on those, reflect how they relate to your behavior and your sense of self through the journal itself. So those are three things that you can do to add into your journal. There's lots of other things, and we'll perhaps come back to those in a more advanced video in the future. So those are the 10 things that I would suggest as tips, and 3 bonus ones included there for you in terms of keeping a magical journal. I hope that this has been not as prescriptive as you thought, but also encouraging for you to go and explore how you keep a magical journal. But more importantly, I wanted to get over the importance of the magical book, the magical journal, and Crowley's teaching of it as to why it's important, why it was such a big factor in Crowley's life, why it's been a massive factor in my own life, and hopefully will be as important to you as well. So thank you for joining me in this video. I'd love to see you in the next one. And as ever, the worker is hidden in the workshop. Thank you.